The cowboy found the native man collapsed near the dry creek bed at dusk, ribs sharp as fence posts beneath skin stretched thin by hunger. The horse snorted and stamped, sensing something wrong. But the cowboy slid down anyway and knelt beside the stranger. The man's lips were cracked, his breath shallow, eyes rolling back as if the land itself had drained him dry. The cowboy lifted him with effort and half dragged, half carried him toward the barn, the smell of hay and old wood wrapping around them like shelter. He laid him on fresh straw, loosened the worn shirt at his chest, and poured water slowly between his lips, careful not to choke him. After a long moment the man swallowed, then breathed deeper, life edging back into him. Night settled as the cowboy worked. He warmed beans over a small fire, tore bread into pieces, and fed the stranger a few bites at a time. The man's eyes opened, dark and sharp, even in weakness, studying the cowboy as if measuring his soul. He spoke softly in his own tongue, then in broken English, thanking him, explaining he had walked for days after being sent to search for food. Soldiers, drought and fear had emptied the land. The cowboy listened without interrupting, his face unreadable, his rifle resting untouched against the wall. He had seen hunger before, and it always looked the same. By morning, pale light filtered through the slats of the barn. The native man could sit up now, strength slowly returning to his limbs. The cowboy brought more food and a blanket, then rode to town and came back before the sun reached its height. His saddlebags heavy with flour and dried meat. They ate together in silence. When the man finally stood ready to leave, the cowboy pointed toward the hills and told him where water might still be found. He pressed the blanket into his hands as if it were nothing at all. The man paused at the edge of the field, turning back for one long look before disappearing into the grass. The day dragged on, quiet and uneasy. As evening came again, dust began to rise along the road, thick and unnatural. The cowboy stepped out of the barn and felt his stomach tighten. 200 warriors stood lined up beyond his fence, horses steady, weapons gleaming in the fading light. At their head was the same man he had saved, now standing tall and strong, eyes calm but powerful. The cowboy knew then that his small act had reached far beyond the barn, and whatever came next would not be simple. The warriors did not move, and neither did the cowboy. The evening air felt stretched thin, as if a single wrong breath might tear it apart. Slowly, the native man at the front lifted his hand, palm open, and the long line behind him remained perfectly still. He spoke in a steady voice, telling the cowboy who he truly was, not a starving wanderer, but a scout and the son of a respected chief. Hunger had humbled him, yet kindness had restored more than his strength. Among his people, a life saved created a bond stronger than blood, and that bond had brought them all to this fence. The cowboy listened, eyes scanning the line of men and then returning to the speaker. He answered simply, saying he had not acted for reward or protection. He had seen a man dying and refused to let the land claim him. The native leader nodded, as if this confirmed something he already believed. With a gesture, several warriors rode forward carrying bundles of dried meat, tanned hides and carefully wrapped tools. They placed them gently on the ground, offerings of gratitude rather than payment. The cowboy hesitated, then accepted them, understanding that refusal would insult the bond now formed. The leader explained why they had come in such numbers. Soldiers were pushing deeper into their territory, and any trail left behind could lead violence to innocent homes. They needed a place to rest, to water their horses, and to decide their next move. The cowboy looked back at his barn, weathered but strong, then at the open land beyond. He knew the risk, but he also knew the cost of turning them away. He told them they could stay until dawn. No fires, no noise, and no harm to the land. A quiet murmur passed through the warriors, relief carried on the wind. As night settled, the men moved with discipline and respect. Horses drank from the trough. Warriors sat in small groups, and the barn became a shelter rather than a target. The leader joined the cowboy near the doorway, and they spoke in low tones about broken promises, shrinking hunting grounds, and the kind of peace that never made it into treaties. There was no hatred in the conversation, only exhaustion and resolve. Before leaving at first light, the leader stood before the cowboy and pressed his forearm against his in a warrior's grip. He promised that no harm would come to this place from his people. As the last rider disappeared into the morning haze, the cowboy understood that mercy, once given, had a way of returning in numbers. 3 days passed, and the land settled back into its uneasy quiet. But the cowboy felt watched by more than just the sky. When the soldiers finally came, they arrived in a hard line of dust and iron, rifles across their saddles and suspicion in their eyes. The officer dismounted and announced his intent to search the property, claiming hostile warriors had been seen nearby. The cowboy met him at the gate, calm and firm, saying no one had crossed his land and no laws had been broken. His voice never wavered, though his heart hammered like hooves in his chest. The soldiers pushed past him anyway, boots crunching in the dirt, eyes scanning the barn and the open fields. The cowboy stood still, hands loose at his sides, trusting a promise he could not see. A sudden sound rolled down from the hills, low and deep, like wind moving through stone. The soldiers froze. Along the ridgelines, shapes appeared one by one. Then dozens more, until the horizon itself seemed to stand up. Warriors lined the heights, silent and unmoving, their presence undeniable. No arrows were drawn, no rifles raised, yet the message pressed down heavier than threat. The officer's face tightened as he counted what could not truly be counted. Pride battled reason, but reason won. He gave a sharp order, and the soldiers retreated, their search unfinished, their authority quietly undone. Dust swallowed them as they left, and the land exhaled. The cowboy leaned against the fence, strength draining from his legs, knowing how close the night had come to blood. From the hills, one rider descended alone. It was the native leader. He spoke no triumph, only gratitude. He told the cowboy that courage did not always ride with weapons, and that standing still could be braver than charging forward. He promised that this land would be remembered and respected, a place where a single man had chosen humanity over fear. Then he pointed to the sky, where clouds were gathering heavy and dark, and said the rains would come early this year. They parted without ceremony. Weeks later, after the first strong storm broke the drought, the cowboy found a bundle tied neatly at his barn door. Inside were seeds, rare and carefully preserved. He planted them along the fence line, and the harvest that followed was the richest he had ever known. From then on, he understood that kindness, once shown, could stand guard like an army.